Oh, spring is arriving at Sarna Buddhist Monastery outside Perth, Ontario, Canada. Always is lovely to see the trees becoming green again, and work on the Dhamma Hall news, and it's certainly beginning to feel like a building. And now when we take people around inside on the weekends when the workers are, it's not such an abstract space with, studs, kind of vague spaces where you have to imagine what's going to happen. So that's very nice. And this weekend we have the first of this season of our new visitor orientations. So I just had a session with keen young men, all men this time, who've come. One of them came from New York State, and speaking about the tradition and situating this monastery basically within the Buddhist tradition historically and culturally within the Thai context. That was very pleasant, very nice group of people. And during the weekend, of course, they'll be oriented to various features of the monastery, where the brooms are kept, and how we tidy up after meals, but also to the pujas, morning and evening pujas, and they'll spend a bit of time in their own rooms, or perhaps just doing some walking meditation outside. So it offers a nice balance for folks to become accustomed to this place, and how to be useful and kind of control when they're here, but also how to make good use of their time in a monastic environment and feel comfortable and welcome in doing so. So it's a great pleasure to see people coming fresh like this, and to see the monastery, the intention behind the monastery realized, at least in this dimension, so beautifully during our open season. So, and as I was walking away from the group coming here, I was thinking, well, probably Sunday, late Sunday, when they're leaving, one of the things they might ask somebody or wonder about themselves is, because they have experienced something different. I mean, monasteries don't feel like very many lay situations that I'm aware of. Some people in retirement who still, I think, do establish quite a lovely monastic-like situation for themselves, are able to. But that's fairly rare, and usually that takes place in one's older age, at least. These are all young fellows. So they'll return to their lives, and they'll wonder, how can I keep something that I got here? So they've maybe experienced some peace, some comfort, some safety, being relaxed in ways that they haven't for some time. I can't speak for any of them, but that's a fairly common experience to find people relating later. So, and certainly after any retreat that I've been on, led, been part of, that is a very common question, isn't it? After a retreat, and I'm sure many of you can remember the last day of a retreat somewhere, and just wanting to know how you can apply more skill in your daily life so that you can kind of retain this feeling of ease or peacefulness, clarity, what have you. So it's in one sense, it's not. It doesn't seem like an easy thing to answer quickly, because the causes and conditions that go into something like a retreat circumstance are actually, if you're trying to enumerate them, would actually be rather complex, rather subtle, and various. And without trying to make a kind of science out of this, like laying it out like the elemental table in chemistry or something, we just know that there are different mood states of mind, different intentions at work. The physical space is arranged differently. Our expectations of ourselves and what I mean are simply different, aren't they? The interest to somehow revive this sense of space, of clarity, and so forth in one's own apartment or home or in one's daily life is a very real thing to encounter. Part answer to it begins with, well, you can begin anywhere in Buddhism. That's one of the beauties of Dhamma, is that it is you can begin anywhere, and if it's considered, reflected upon in a skillful way with some wisdom, you can eventually from it. That's sort of my off the cuff sense of it. So you can begin with the orientation that right view provides. Right view, what would that be? Just having some appreciation for, if not the full complexity of karma, the operation of karma, but simply some appreciation for the fact that things that we intend in our lives have results. So if we're in a bad mood and these give rise to some disagreeable thoughts, some nasty sort of attitudes maybe towards someone we've been encountering, or what have you, we do realize, however, that cycle of difficulty is going to continue until we put it to a stop, either until we just stop doing it and let it run its course, or until we replace it. We replace these thoughts with more wholesome ones. So this orientation of Dhamma offers various ways of perceiving, conceiving of our lives in a skillful way. We understand that we ought not to expect things to remain the same, for instance, because we've been told about the fact of impermanence, that things change. They don't just change because they're forced to. They change because they can't not change. It's of their very nature. Things, the very nature of things. That includes the physical objects in our lives, how our car runs. It includes things like this, and also the moods of ourselves and those around us, our attitudes, our likes and dislikes, the milk in the fridge. Everything changes. Everything has to change owing to causes and conditions. So we understand this about reality, about our lives, and this orientation towards life puts us on some sort of more wiser footing with the rest of life. We understand that dukkha, suffering, unhappiness is just a kind of inevitable feature of life. Because things change, things get old, our bodies get old, for instance. So we're subject to aging, to sickening, to dying. People around us, those that we love, whom we hold dear, they are subject to these same forces as well. So that element of suffering, of unhappiness, and of unsatisfactoriness is simply a present thing. But it's altogether a different thing to grieve over change, to be blindsided by it every time it happens, or to just understand, to open the arms in a broad and generous enough way, metaphorically speaking, to allow for it to be what it is. So that when these changes overtake us, overcome us, they do so within a more generous atmosphere of understanding and acceptance. And then we can deal with this change as it's occurred, our own sickening, say the death of a loved one. And of course, there are things to adjust to, many, many things, but at least we don't carry around like a 20-pound weight on each foot. We don't carry around this extra burden of non-acceptance, of being blindsided once again by change. Some of the change that occurs, of course, is actually rather pleasant, because something disagreeable that's kind of been, toothaches, goodness knows, sometimes they end in one way or another. Tooth gets pulled, gets fixed, or whatever the causes and conditions were for that toothache, they subside. And if we pay attention, the subsidence of that is actually that ease is a lovely thing, something that we feel grateful for. And finally, the way in which we personalize things, as I sometimes say, the way we, I think of how we kind of colonize experience. That is, we colonize our experience, we personalize it, we make it ours, and so we vastly complexify the misunderstanding of personal experience, of being a self. So we take ourselves personally. We take the things that we live around and live with, the people we live with, we take them personally, and we don't let things run their course and simply be what they are. So when we understand here again, when we've reflected a little on these three characteristics, the orientation or reorientation that they bring to life does allow us to live more in harmony with the way things are and with our lives. So this is some way through the reflective process that we'll say returning from a retreat can be an easier experience, and re-entering our busy lives can be easier. For one thing, we don't expect the things of our lives to have suddenly changed magically, because we've had, some very peaceful and lovely and perhaps insightful times in meditation. We expect things will be as they are, but we have tools too, don't we? We have tools. We're always encountering our mental lives. We misunderstand things. We dwell on things. We ruminate over certain experiences that we have in unskillful ways, and increase our suffering in doing so. So one way in a very practical way of dealing with such matters is by considering the Buddha's advice around treating distracting thoughts, distracting unwholesome thoughts that are kind of unworthy of us, or certainly lead us into experiencing suffering. One is simple replacement. So here we have a simile of a carpenter. You can imagine a carpenter, and he's joining two pieces of wood with a peg. He's drilled a hole through the two pieces of wood, and when the peg goes through the two pieces of wood in that single hole through both of them, it joins the pieces of wood. And initially, the carpenter, he or she, has used a coarse peg to get things kind of arranged while the rest of this piece of furniture is being put together. But when it's being finished off, then the carpenter replaces the coarse peg with a fine peg. The fine peg fits the hole better, it enters more smoothly, and it looks better. So in other words, there's simple replacement here. So you have some distracting thoughts of some kind, and you replace these thoughts with something more wholesome. Let's say you notice that you are feeling sorry for yourself. You're kind of in a grumpy mood. People haven't noticed things that you've done for them, or you're just feeling out of sorts because of the change of season, and you can't get your motivation up, and so there's a great deal of emphasis and attention given to this kind of sour, unhappy state of mind, which it may be difficult to find the cause for entirely, but you're just aware of. It's like living in a bit of fog and rain, and where it's cold. You don't want to be there. It's no one's fault in particular that you can point to, except perhaps your own. But there it is. It's uncomfortable, and there it is. What do you do with it? So one thing here is to replace it then with something. In that case, you can replace it with one of the Brahma Viharas, because the Brahma Viharas have a quality of antidote to them. So here you have a very skillful way of replacing this mood with feeling of appreciative joy, feeling appreciation for something in your life, gratitude for something, or observing someone else's happiness, someone else's success, getting out of this unpleasant mood by considering someone else, or considering yourself in a grateful frame of mind. So changing the frame of reference in this way, it's a beautiful thing. And as I say, it is one way of looking at that is simply that you're replacing one particular mood, a very coarse mood, uncomfortable mood, with a very refined one, and it can change the course of a day very quickly. Another way is to examine the danger, and the simile that the Buddha gives for this is if you imagine a youth, a young man or woman standing in front of a mirror, admiring themselves, maybe ready to go out on a date, and draped around their shoulder is say a dead dog or the carcass of a snake or something very unseemly, very, very ugly, in fact, repulsive. So examining the danger is observing one's present state of mind, one's mood, seeing the difficulty in it, and then reflecting on it for what it is, seeing that this is something I cannot continue to contribute to. I'm feeding this fire. I'm giving it fuel somehow. I need to stop it because it leads only to more in my experience, more difficulty, and likely this mood of mine, these thoughts of mine, will bring others into some difficulty as well, because the energy that we project through our moods, of course, affects others around us. So here I have loved ones, maybe children or what have you, and if I don't change this mood, which is kind of sullying my character and my experience at this time, I will also affect others that I care about. So reflecting on one's mood in this way changing. You're giving yourself good reason to change your mind, you might say, by examining the danger. If I continue in this way, I could actually further darken my thought stream, darken my mood, and really do myself some karmic danger, perhaps. Maybe there's could lead to a deepening of anger, and goodness knows sometimes anger can even lead to violence, and wouldn't that be a very unfortunate thing for myself and others? So one is looking in kind of rational, careful terms at what is occurring, and pulling oneself out of the situation in that way. Another way of removing these distracting thoughts, we might say perhaps the thoughts at this time would not be so compelling and dark as what I've just been describing, but is just turning away. You just change your mind. You turn away, attend to something else. So you bring into focus in your mindscape at that time something quite different. It might just be, you're reading a mystery novel, and actually the description of the crime which is committed is actually very disagreeable and unpleasant. And one way of just getting yourself out of this is closing the book, walking away, and maybe doing something useful like watering the plants or doing your laundry, folding your laundry. So changing your mind, and as I've indicated, often the body is very much involved in this. Getting up and doing something different, it'll change your outlook. And the final one is some sort of substitution. So, or I shouldn't say the final one. The fourth one is a kind of substitution. And here the body is very much involved, at least in the example that the Buddha gives, and that is, you imagine you're running, and then you just slow down to a walk. Okay, that's easier. That change has brought the tempo of these unwholesome, distracting thoughts down. Just relaxing a bit, and when you're walking quickly, you can walk more slowly, and when you're walking slowly, you can come to a stop. And now that you've stopped, you're in a position to take a seat. After taking a seat, you can even lie down. So the body is figuratively very much involved in this example here, but it's an example of toning things down in some way. The final one is the use of force. This is an interesting one. The example is how with ease a strong man subdues a weaker man. And I suppose here we could imagine let's say a child who is having a tantrum, and is just, was picked up a stick or something, as hitting you, or maybe his younger sister or mother or something like that, and you just come over and you grab the child's arms, and you take the stick from it, and you lead it over to a chair. You sit it down in the chair, and you sit down beside the child and just hold it until that energy has just subsided. So the use of strength in this way, a kind of wholesome force, to bring one into a kind of relaxed state. So these are examples of. So we started out with returning from a meditation retreat, wanting to retain this sense of peace and clarity, and I'm now we've delved into the possibility of the next day, finding yourself back in the soup, old habits regarding your traffic or the soup that you're cooking, or the conversation with someone on the phone, old habits have revived and seem to have completely erased all the benefit you've just had from this retreat. So these are ways of approaching that kind of rude awakening, you might say. But we're not always in that situation. If a person has been working with the Buddhist path and Buddhist teachings for some time, they do absorb into our character, get into our bones and circulation system, as it were. And sometimes, especially the examples that are given in some of these similes, maybe don't seem to apply. They're a little extreme, or really quite extreme. But what can we do when things just slip a little bit? And with the increased mindfulness that comes from some kind of regular exposure to practice, we notice these slippages more easily. And this is a good thing, actually. We notice them more easily and earlier. So the duration and the depth of unwholesome states of mind is not so pronounced. And this is a very good thing. And sometimes we forget to acknowledge that very fact. In the past, there have been times when I've been in that kind of mood for a day and a half, and I just, I've noticed it and kind of brought it to a halt here in an hour and a half, or in a day, or some of those unruly conversations that we have with a family member twice a year, and they get out of hand quite easily, and that can be a very difficult thing to carry around at times for the next couple of days. But here again, noticing it a little earlier this time, and bringing some ease back some clarity back into the mind and heart earlier. That is progress. So I would say, along with noticing the times when things are really going very smoothly, and practice is going well, and daily life is much improved, noticeably so. We need to observe how it is, and through comparison, how it is that old habits are being refined. They're becoming lessened. Things don't go away typically in an instant, but they what's the fancy word? They attenuate. Yeah. So another thing I would say, and I expect many of you have discovered this sometimes years ago on your own, but I guess the first thing is an incitement to regular practice, daily practice. I mean, teachers of mine, friends of mine who have taught regularly, and especially those who have a kind of regular group of students, people who come to their retreats. These are monks of some long standing. And so they know maybe this group of practitioners really quite well. And they'll say things that might sound a little bold to them, and maybe a little bit upsetting if they seem to reflect badly on your own practice at this time. But they'll say, if you're not practicing 2 hours a day, you're not really practicing. They'll really try to incite some clarity and resolve in their practice in ways like that. Maybe not everyone here feels that they're on board with that yet, or feel they have the life circumstances to allow it. But just to accentuate the value of actually regular practice, the mind is very much appreciative of regularity. This is how good habits are formed. So, and you feel the benefit of it immediately, really quite immediately. Getting up, having a morning meditation, for example, having an evening meditation, for example. For retired people, even regularly finding a period in the afternoon for meditation. Or some people can arrange, say the kids have left home and you and your husband, you and your wife, say, have some kind of practice, maybe arranging Sunday afternoons, 2-3 hours on a Sunday afternoon or a Wednesday morning, or something like that. That is giving some wholesome energy, putting some pressure on one's activities where one normally attends, and finding and asking yourself, do I need to do that? Do I need to do that so much? I enjoy going out to coffee with my girlfriends or my boyfriends, but I can still keep these relations alive without doing it quite so often. Whatever it is, I'm not sure what the example should be. Of course, work lives are a different matter. They begin. There's not a lot of slack or allowance for slack in them, so you have to get up at certain times and go to work and come back and all of that. But any day has some capacity for creative, skillful arrangement. And if you normally get up at 7:30, you could try getting up at 6:45, meditating for 40 minutes. If you normally get up at 6, you could try a little bit earlier. Mornings are just a really fine time to meditate, to set a kind of tone on the day. And I know working people, middle-aged people who have their share of responsibilities and who get up quite early in the morning and even do some period of chanting and meditation before they have their breakfast and head for work. So it is possible with some determination. Evenings also, at the end of the day, when the mind and body have accumulated some of the tensions of the day, the regular kinds of things, just from moving to and forth in the day, and also the conversations that have accumulated. Some of them, a little bit hard to slack off, to remove from the mind stream. So just again, a period of sitting, relaxing, remembering how to be peaceful, letting the body teach you, in a sense. Isn't it interesting what difference it makes to observe all of those muscles around the lips, and then feel them relax, and feel the difference between the state of tension and the state of relaxation. And there is a kind of wholesome pleasure in that. And that same kind of sense of ease can be brought to the whole body. And when you're giving your attention to that mindfully, you're not attending, you're not remembering to attend anymore to that little back and forth you had with a coworker or on the bus or whatever it was. Things are, this does bring some ease quite quickly to a person. So think in those terms, daily meditation, whatever you're doing now, see if you can do a little bit more. Inquire, quite honestly in yourself, how you could do a bit more, half an hour extra a day, something like that. And I would put it to you that all of us go to sleep at some time, and before we actually fall asleep, we're in a very relaxed state. And the state of relaxation is actually very conducive to watching the breath. When the body is relaxed, the mind is quite easy for the heart and mind to be peaceful, at ease, in a kind of happy state. And the mind and body in that way, it's quite easy. In fact, it's more natural, you might say, to watch something like the breath. Mindfulness is clear. It's easier, more comfortable to attend to the body. On the subject of meditation, and this may not be appealing to everybody, I think we all, though, a person who is used to meditation and has taken an interest in governing their mind states, in watching the degree of clarity, of purity in their minds, will also probably be a little more sensitive to their environment. So at least having things tidy in your space, clean to a certain degree. And many of us, I think many people really appreciate some kind of shrine, perhaps with a Buddha Rupa. Maybe a Buddha Rupa isn't quite your thing. Maybe, that doesn't really instill a lot of interest or faith in you right now. But just, some flowers, some incense, a bell, some photograph which is somehow inspiring or brings beauty into a space. In other words, some sense of a sacred space in your home, a little shrine, or just some place where it feels natural when you have that time, when you make that time. It feels natural to return to and sit in a way that's comfortable and watch your breath or cultivate loving kindness or what have you. And something that goes along with all of this, and especially with daily meditation, I'll mention two things. One is thinking in terms of renunciation. That's a fairly daunting word for most people, and so I often reflect with appreciation on the. I think the Dalai Lama translates this word nekama as simplification. So rather than thinking of renunciation, which is giving up, my husband, my wife, my cat, whatever it is, leaving home and becoming a nun or a monk, or no, not necessarily in those terms, but simplification of one's life. Where you spend your money, for instance. Do you have a garden rather than spending your time out, bustling about in the shopping district as often as you do? Maybe a little more time in a garden or caring for some plants. Are there things in your home that are just excessive and really don't bring you any? They aren't particularly useful or even particularly pleasing, but you're just habituated to them because they've always been present in this or that room. Everyone, I think, has experienced the value of a spring cleaning and just breathing a few sighs of relief when a space is literally decluttered, cleaned up and decluttered. Things given away to people who can use them, for instance. So simplification can be extremely simple in nature, just decluttering. But the mind is more easy to bring into a peaceful state when there's less to attend to, less to consider, less to worry about. Oh, what should I do with that? Oh, is that a chip on that? Should I fix it or give it away or throw it away? The mind does go out to these kinds of things in our physical world quite often. So simplifying our world in this way. And then simplifying our needs too. By simplifying the needs, of course, it means that our expenses go down. The types of clothes you wear, the numbers of sweaters you own, for instance. Maybe you can give a couple of them away and still keep your 3 favorite ones, and actually that's enough, and you'll put away your sweater catalog and just not worry about it. Or if you're going to buy a sweater, give it to someone else, and then just keep those old three standbys and be content with those. So finding some kind of contentment with what you have, or at least in some simple way, it can bring some real ease to life. I notice this in my kuti. I have, like the monks here, 12 by 16 kuti, and in that size of space, it's pretty easy for, I notice if there's an extra book in there that no longer fits in this little shelf I have, and then, well, now it has to go on my desk. That means I've got something more on my desk, So I notice very quickly when there's an extra thing sitting, an extra pair of shoes. I have room exactly for 2 pairs of shoes on my little plastic mat inside the door. So I wouldn't know where to put another pair. I'd have to put one of those pair of shoes somewhere else. So, but it keeps things tidy and kind of clean in one's mental life as well as one's physical life. And on top of all of this, before all of this, in a sense, but implied in all of it, is keeping one's precepts. I'm sure all of you from time to time take 5 precepts. Maybe I know some of you have quite often taken 8 precepts, but certainly in the 5 basic precepts for lay people, harmlessness and being honest with one's dealings, with one's partner if you have one, and also in terms of other people feel comfortable around us, because we'll never steal from them. We aren't going to lie to them, and so on. We're going to be gentle with them and careful and considerate. All of these things make a huge difference in our social relations, but they are utterly necessary as a foundation. Spiritual life begins. It assumes a level of virtue. And as mindfulness develops and refines over time, virtue also refines, because our sensitivity to what lying is, or this deception, for instance, becomes more and more refined. So our speech becomes clearer, more beautiful, as an example. So you've probably all heard these things before, but my own experience for myself and certainly for the people coming and going from monasteries and retreats is that everyone appreciates sometimes, or seems to need some reminders of these things. All of these things are. This isn't subtle. It is subtle. Truths are all straightforward, but they also have their subtleties, and they get more and more subtle and beautiful as time goes on. But none of them, I don't think, are difficult to understand. This isn't, what we sometimes refer to as high Dhamma. I haven't trotted out any long lists or tried to explain to you the intricacies of dependent origination this evening. But it's implied in this. As I say, all of Dhamma is found in the simplest of the elements of Dhamma. So I'll leave these reflections for you this evening.